Are you listening? Have you ever had the feeling that something invisible is trying to touch your soul? A vague but persistent feeling, as if there is a message lurking in the events happening around you. But no matter how hard you try, you cannot grasp it. There are days when you walk on the path of life where everything seems to turn in an unpredictable direction. The plans you once cherished, the dreams you once passionately pursued, all suddenly vanish into thin air. Opportunities slip through your fingers for no clear reason. The friends you once trusted leave. Relationships that seemed solid crack inexplicably. You ask yourself, why is everything happening like this? Is this just a coincidence, or is something greater at work? Dark days stretch on, trapping you in a spiral of confusion and despair. You turn to God, kneel down to pray with the hope of finding answers. But only silence seems to answer. No sign, no change. Your heart is full of questions. Has God left me, or is he testing me? You wait for an affirmation from heaven, but there is nothing, just a terrifying stillness. Everything in you begins to shake. The faith you once thought was solid now suddenly becomes as fragile as a candle in the wind. You begin to doubt, if God is really there, why doesn't he answer me? But do you know, God is never silent. He is still speaking. It's just that we may be too busy with our pain and disappointment to realize that what is happening is his answer. Nothing happens without a reason. The storms in your life are not punishment, but may be an awakening. C.S. Lewis once wrote in The Problem of Pain, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Perhaps you do not hear God because he is no longer whispering. He is shouting. The difficulties you are facing are not a sign of abandonment, but a wake-up call. The losses, the trials may be his way of shaking you to bring you back to the path he has destined. The problem is not whether God is speaking, but whether you are listening. You may be at the most important crossroads of your life. What you see as failures may actually be God's hand protecting and guiding you. But if you do not pay attention, you will miss the message. Stop, be still, listen. Because when God speaks, there is always a reason. Closed doors. There are doors you've placed all your hopes on, paths you thought would lead to a bright future, but then, in a moment, everything suddenly closes before your eyes. A job you poured your heart into suddenly fails. A relationship you believed was eternal suddenly breaks apart. The plans you carefully built, the dreams you thought God had given you, all suddenly turn to ashes. You stand amidst the ruins and wonder, why did God let this happen? If he really loves me, why doesn't he open a way for me? Disappointment weighs you down. You begin to doubt whether you've gone down the wrong path, whether your efforts have been in vain. But what if, instead of a rejection, this is a protection? What if, instead of closing the door to cause you pain, God is closing that door to keep you from something worse? C.S. Lewis once wrote in Mere Christianity, we can be sure that we have never had even the slightest experience of those powers which one day will be our full and lasting possession, but we know that already our Father is preparing us for them. God sees what we cannot see. He knows which paths lead to glory and which paths will drag us into the abyss. What you see as a loss may actually be a deliverance that God has given you. Remember the story of Joseph in the Bible. As a boy with big dreams, Joseph thought his life would be full of glory. But then his brothers, out of jealousy, sold him into slavery. A door closed. He was taken to a foreign land, serving in the house of a powerful master. He worked hard, remained faithful to God, but then once again fate turned its back on him. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. Another door closed before his life. If we put ourselves in Joseph's position, we might ask, Why did God let this happen? Why did he let me fall into darkness when I had lived righteously? But what Joseph could not see at that time was that each closed door was bringing him closer to the purpose that God had destined. If he had not been sold into slavery, if he had not been thrown into prison, he would not have had the opportunity to become the vizier of Egypt, saving an entire nation from famine. What initially seemed like betrayal, injustice, failure, all were actually pieces in God's perfect plan. So if a door closes, don't panic. Don't despair. God does not take anything away from you without a reason. When a door closes, believe that He is leading you to a better door, a door that you may not see right now, but will be the door that leads you to the destiny He has prepared. Be patient. Hold on to your faith, for God never closes a door without planning to open a new path for you. Unending storms. There are periods in life you feel like are standing in the middle of an endless storm. Everything seemed to be stable suddenly collapses. One difficulty just passed, another challenge rushes in, pulls you into a vortex of disappointment and fatigue. You try to struggle to get up, but not long after are knocked down by another event. You kneel down to pray, earnestly beg God to give a way out. But instead of a clear answer, all that you receive back is silence. You ask yourself, has God abandoned me? Is He listening to my prayers? But perhaps He has not left you. He is testing you. Difficulties are not a sign of abandonment, but a means for God to refine you, to transform you into a stronger person, more steadfast and closer to Him. C.S. Lewis writes in The Problem of Pain, hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. Remember the story of Job in the Bible. Job was a righteous, upright, and God-fearing man. But despite living a righteous life, he still faced terrible trials. In a short time, he lost everything: family, possessions, health. From a respected person, he became a lonely, suffering both physically and mentally. His friends thought this was God's punishment. Even his wife advised him to give up his faith. But Job persevered. He did not understand why these things happened, but he held firm his faith in God. And in the end, God not only restored what Job had lost, but also gave him double the blessings. What seemed like destruction became the path for God to reveal His power and mercy. The storm in your life is not a sign that you are on the wrong path. Sometimes it is a sign that you are on the right path. Look at the challenges not as a punishment, but as a test of faith. An iron bar can only become a sharp sword when it is forged in red fire and a hammer. A follower of God can only become stronger when he has overcome difficult days while still maintaining faith. So, if you feel like you are being overwhelmed in the storm, do not be discouraged. Persevere. Trust God. For when the storm passes, you will see that He has always been there, supporting you in every step. Increased temptations. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to live according to your faith, the more intense the temptations become? When you decide to start praying more regularly, suddenly there are countless things that distract you. A phone message, an unexpected task, or simply an unusual drowsiness. When you want to keep your mind pure, tempting images and thoughts keep appearing. When you try to consistently walk with God, suddenly there are easier, more attractive paths, but they pull you away from your faith. This is not a coincidence. This is how the devil works. C.S. Lewis described this very clearly in the Screwtape Letters. The safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. They do not appear in a scary form or attack you obviously. They creep into daily habits, in small decisions that you do not notice. Today, you might think that skipping a prayer session is okay. Tomorrow you find ridding. The Bible seems boring. Then gradually, you realize you have drifted away from God without knowing when. Remember, the devil does not need to attack those who are already lost. He only attacks those who are seeking God. He knows who are the most dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, those who are strong in faith. Therefore, when you feel more tempted, realize that this is not a sign of failure, but a sign that you are getting closer to God. Do not let small temptations lead you too far. Be alert, pray, be steadfast. For if you persevere, the reward for you will be greater than anything this world can offer. Spiritual loneliness. There are times when you kneel down to pray, but it seems the sky remains silent. You plead for a sign from God, a word of comfort, an affirmation that He is still there, listening and loving you. But the response is only a terrifying stillness. There is no dream bearing an omen. There is no miracle happening. There is no familiar, warm feeling of divine presence that you once felt. You go to church, but the sermons no longer stir your heart as before. You open the Bible, but the words seem to lose the liveliness that once inspired you. An empty, distant feeling creeps into your soul, whispering, "Has God left you? Has God forsaken me? Or have I drifted away from Him? Is my faith growing cold without me realizing it?" But pause for a moment. God's silence does not mean He is no longer there. C.S. Lewis wrote in the Screwtape Letters, "The safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, one without signposts." True spiritual loneliness is one of the greatest trials of the life of faith. When everything is going well, we easily trust God. When we feel His presence, we easily praise and glorify Him. But when God seems silent, when our prayers receive no response, that is when true faith is tested. Remember Jesus on the cross. In His most painful moment, bearing the sins of all humanity, He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. That moment was the peak of spiritual loneliness. But did God the Father truly abandon His Son? No, He was still there, even when Jesus could not feel Him. If Jesus Himself experienced God's silence, then we are no exception. But that silence is not rejection. God does not leave you. He does not abandon you. These periods of silence are not punishment, but a test, an opportunity for you to prove that you love God for Himself, not just for the blessings He gives. So if you are in God's silence, do not give up. Keep faithful. Keep praying. Keep trusting, for God is still there. He is still listening. And when the time is right, He will reveal Himself to you in a deeper way than ever. Final word. What will you do? God never lets you go through hardship without a purpose. He does not test you to make you fall, but to make you grow. There has never been a faithful servant of God who did not experience the fire of trial. Moses had to wander in the desert. Job lost everything. Joseph was sold into slavery. David was hunted. Paul was imprisoned. And even Jesus had to suffer on the cross. But they all had one thing in common. They did not give up. They did not let the trials make them lose faith. C.S. Lewis once said in Mere Christianity, "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods." There will be times when you feel tired, wanting to give up. You will doubt yourself, even doubt God. But that is the most important moment, the moment that decides whether you will fall or keep going. So, what will you do now? Will you let fear stop you, or will you stand firm in faith? Will you let trials overwhelm you, or will you let them shape you into the person God wants you to be? Remember, God is not punishing you. He is preparing you for something greater. If these words touch your soul, if you see yourself in these signs, then leave a comment